All right. Go to Graham. All right, we live. What's going on? Peace and blessings, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Casket Ready. I am your host, Mr. Life, and I'm also here with my co-host, Real Estate Rob. What's going on, bro?
What's going on? Yeah, man. Ready for the show tonight?
I'm ready, man. I'm ready to go. I'm casket ready. You know what I'm
saying? You don't want to be too casket ready. You might be in a casket for real. But I hear you though.
I got some time. So today's topic, job coverage just ain't enough. I guess before we actually get into it, we do have a video that we do want to play for you guys. Give me a second. Let me go ahead and get that video ready. Hold up. You can see it on your end.
Yeah, it's up there.
All right, cool.
Perfect.
I hear much too often is that the life insurance you have at work is enough. But there are 4 things that you need to know. 1, if you leave your job, you may not be able to take that policy with you. 2, if you're able to convert it, the cost could increase considerably based on your current age and any health issues that you may have. 3, because it's a group policy, it may not have all of the features available in a private plan, like living benefits and other riders. And 4, the amount of coverage offered to you is probably not nearly enough. So life insurance is meant to be a supplement to your own personal plan.
Yeah, she dropped some gems. What I want you to do, Kay, actually go back to number 1. So let's go over every single one that she went over one by one. So play 1 again, and then we'll go over that.
Got you.
The biggest misconceptions I hear much too often is that the life insurance you have at work is enough. But there are 4 things that you need to know. 1, if you leave your job, you may not be able to take that policy with you.
Perfect. Yeah, so now that's the topic right there. You can probably pull it off the screen so the people can see us. There we go. Yeah, so the first one was what she said?
Yeah, so when you leave your job, you may not be able to take the coverage with you.
Okay. So that's definitely a good one, right there. Where a lot of times we don't think about that is that once we actually leave the job, we might actually not be able to take the coverage with us. So a lot of times you don't really think about it. Like a lot of people be like, hey, I have the coverage with my job and all that type of stuff. But what if you leave? That means you no longer have that coverage. And that means you lost that coverage that you had before. So, for example, you leave a job and God forbid something happened in between you leaving that job and going to another job, you don't have any coverage. And on top of that, you don't know what the new job coverage is going to be and the stuff that it comes with. And that's one of those things a lot of people don't necessarily talk about a lot of times.
No, absolutely. And then let's talk about the health risks too, because naturally when you're working at a job for having however many years, right? Whether it's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, naturally what happens? You get older and then you might get sick. So what happens within those 30 years if you leave the job and you end up getting sick and you never got another policy? Now when you try to get a policy, more than likely it's a high chance you're going to get denied based off of the situation. Every situation is a case by case. However, you're just risking it, leaving the job and not having no coverage at all, like you were saying. So, and then what happens is that also with the job, it's a master policy that your employer has. Now, what does that mean? That's basically saying that you have a certificate, but your employer actually owns the policy. So you're actually not even the owner on the policy. But you still have coverage though, regardless. Even if you're not the owner, you still have some coverage. But if you leave, you're leaving with nothing. It stays with the job. And a lot of people don't realize that. They say, "Oh, I'm good. I got coverage. Don't worry about it." Not realizing that they're covered, but they're not fully covered. You know, because if something happens, then that's it. The coverage is gone. You know.
No, that's a real valid point. Where, you know, like you said, the coverage, something happens, the coverage doesn't travel with you. But let's talk about too, like, what are some of the main things that people talk about at the end of the day when it comes to having job coverage because of the cost of it. Like, oh yeah, I got it on my job and it's super cheap. So you want to talk about why is it super cheap?
It's super cheap because you got only a few $1,000s in coverage. Like that's why it's cheap. That's why it's $2-3 per pay cycle, right? Or per month, right? And because you're not really getting a lot of coverage. So it is one of the things where you're literally getting what you pay for. You're lucky if you get $50,000 worth of coverage with your job. You're lucky, you know. And once again, and then also what happens is it's what we call an ART, which is an annual renewable term. That means that every single year, that premium, which is the payment, is increasing every single year. It doesn't stay the same. Versus the individual policy, it's level. So when you pay into the policy, you're paying the same premium. You're making the same payment every single year. And people don't realize that. But that's why it's so cheap, because it's actually going to, it's what we call an increasing term. It goes up every single year. That's why it's cheap in the beginning. You get a little bit of coverage, you know? So that's how that works.
To your point, at the end of the day, it's crazy because everybody like is dirt cheap. So it's a group policy. So that's like the best way I like to put that in. That's like everybody putting in on a pot. You know, that's why it's so cheap. That's why it's 50 cents on a dollar, and they don't give you that much coverage. So a lot of times, those policies is only like, you know, $10,000 to $20,000 worth of coverage you're getting from your job, which is just enough to bury you. But again, it doesn't come with all the new benefits that normally come with life insurance policies. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And it's, think about it like you said, like you just like put up a good analogy. Like think about it like a pizza pie though. Like if everybody go put in a chip in for a pizza, everybody get a slice, but that's what you're getting. It's just a slice, you know, versus you pay for the whole pie, like that's yours. Like it ain't, you know, it ain't going nowhere. You're gonna have that pie for quite some time, you know. And people don't realize that with these with the coverages from the job, there are some benefits, but I feel like there's more a downfall versus the benefits. Now, here's the benefit to having a policy with your job. There's some people who may or may not get approved outside of their job. Now, if you can't get approved out, and the truth is you won't know till you apply, right? But you may get denied a policy, an individual policy. So I always tell people, I'm not bashing the policies with your job. I'm just strictly saying you should also get something outside of your job, so you could have both. And I want to highlight that, and that's important because, you know, a lot of times we think one is better than the other. No, have both. Have one with your job, and then while you're working, try your best to get approved for a policy outside of your job. And then, you know, to take it a step even further, there is what we call a conversion. I'm not even going to get there yet, but I actually want to go back to that video and hit number 2 or 3 on it. It's no harm in absolutely. There's no harm in having multiple policies. You know, absolutely. Well, while I pull that up, Rob, what do you think, I guess, are some of the fears of why people, you know, just want to get it with the job and not outside of the job?
I mean, it's an easy no. Let's be honest, though. Like, you know what I mean? When people talk about life insurance, they just want you to get out their face. If we being honest, it's an easy no. So then I got it with the job. Like, that's like a normal, I don't want to talk about it, let it go. And let's be honest, like, nobody likes to talk about death. So it's just an easy way to back off to your point, you know what I mean? And end the conversation right there. Because, again, not a lot of people like talking about death. It's not a fun topic. It's morbid. So nobody wants to talk about potentially not being on this earth anymore and thinking about that thought.
2, if you're able to convert it, the cost could increase considerably based on your current age and any health issues that you may have.
Now this is a good one right here, like you said, Kay, with the that she brought up with health issues, and if you do convert it, so even if you are able to convert it, now depending on what age you're at, it's going to cost you way more money than it would have if you had a separate policy outside of your job. You know what I mean? And so, and also on top of that, it may not come with the certain benefits that a normal policy have. You're restricted to whatever that job signed up for as far as coverage. So they have complete control over what you're getting. So that means you can get a policy with $40,000, $50,000 max with no living benefits. You know what I mean? All types of stuff, which are crucial things that if something were to happen to you. So not only is it important to actually know what you're getting, but actually know what you're covered for if something really were to happen.
And speaking of know what you're getting, right? Like you got to go to like your human resource department. Like there's always a department with your job when you sign up on that job that will let you know how much coverage you have, what the policy entails. Once again, your employer being the owner of the policy, your employer, which is your boss, has the key literally to that policy, right? You just get a certificate. What does that certificate entails? Who are the beneficiaries on that policy? And when we're talking about conversion, you have a limited amount of time to convert that policy into from that term policy into a permanent policy. Because think about it, when you leave a job, your first 30 days after you leave a job, you ain't thinking about no insurance. You thinking about like, how you gonna eat. You thinking about, what's the next flex, what's the next move. So 30 days goes by just like that. So then, and so you have to like do it as soon as like I'm talking about literally like the day after you quit or you get fired or whatever, the day you leave, make sure that you are on the phone with this life insurance company, converting that term policy into a permanent policy is super important because it's still a process for it to be converted in general. So you want to get on the phone as soon as possible and get that done.
Now that's a good point. You probably want to put this on the screen, Kay, but no, that's a good point though, because it's so crucial, because depending on the age that you're ready to retire and all that type of stuff is important, because if you don't get it done in that 30 days and God forbid you're not insurable, that becomes a huge problem at that point. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, like also when it comes to these policies, right? Remember, when it comes to also converting, you also get a certain amount of credits with the term policy converting into the permanent policy. So they start you off based off of how much the whole life or the IUL is worth, and what term policy you had and how much that's worth will determine how much credit that the life insurance company is going to give you to convert that term into that permanent, meaning that you're going to get some type of cash value, maybe a small amount, but you're going to get some type of cash value that's going to already be accrued to the policy, because that credit from that term policy that you had for the past 30 years is now going into that whole life or that IUL policy. And once again, they're going to give you a credit for that. And let's just say, for example, you had $50,000 term policy, and now you got a $50,000 IUL. Maybe you build up maybe $1,000 in cash. And these are not exact numbers. I'm just giving you an example. You build up $1,000 in cash, and then now you already started off good with your IUL. So those things do happen based off of the company, and it varies from company to company. But a general rule of thumb, the concept of you converting and having credits to go to another company, it actually does happen that way. So it's good to convert. That's the benefit to converting your policy, is those credits.
Good point.
And then also, when it comes to your job now, keep another thing in mind, that you're paying for so many things, right? And you're not realizing that because the money's just coming out. It's a deduction that's coming out your check every single week or bi-weekly or whatever it may be. If you don't get hurt on the job, and I'm not saying this for all companies, I'm not saying this for all life insurance companies, I'm not saying this for all employers, but a lot of times, excuse me, there are clauses that are saying if you don't get hurt on the job, they're not guaranteed to pay out. So in other words, if you are, and once again, it's a contract, so it's based off what happens in a contract. From what I've seen, most life insurance companies pay out, all life insurance companies pay out. But when it comes to the job, though, it's a very fine line. I've seen more life insurance companies pay out with individual policies than the ones on the job. And I'm just being honest. I'm not saying that they don't. What I'm saying is that that's what I've seen throughout the course of time. So it's very important to get an individual policy along with the one that you have with your job, because a lot of times people say, "Oh, I outlived this. I outlived the. Oh, they don't pay out." No, you outlived the term. That's what happened in most cases. You muted if you were saying something, bro. Okay. Yeah. So that's what happened in most cases. You actually outlived the term. But not sidetracking. Make sure you get a policy with your job. Make sure you get one as an individual as well. It's super important to have both. Why? Because you just don't know what's going to happen. And once again, I would rather me just sit after me saying sorry for your for your past loved ones. I want to deliver a check to your home for $100,000, for $50,000, for $75,000, for $250,000. Why? Because it's important. It will change your family's life, hands down. And most people, like I said, they're not going to believe it. They're not going to do it. Why? Because they're not. But the ones who are listening and who actually want to make a change in their lives, you'll take heed to what we're saying and get something outside of your job. I promise you.
No, and you brought up, two good points. At the end of the day, when it comes to the coverage, at the end of the day, overall, like it's a lot of times we don't think about what's in that contract. Because remember, whatever the job signed up for, that's what they signed up for. So that's why you won't really know when it comes to that type of situation. It's just one of those things where, okay, now I'm converting a policy over, and now all of a sudden, the only thing I know about is literally exactly what the job says. Oh, I'm only covered for this amount of stuff. I don't have living benefits. I don't have this. I don't have that. And so you're just stuck with whatever that job gave you. But that's why you want to get your own policy outside of your job.
And also here, and here's another thing too, when it comes to your job, right? Let's look how many entrepreneurs we have out here. It's not just about the job, right? We have entrepreneurs out here. Like there's so many entrepreneurs. What benefits do you have as an entrepreneur? You don't have any benefits. Everything is on you. Now, I'm not saying that you can't create your benefits, but there's nothing set up for you when you are an entrepreneur. So you must get a policy, outside. Like when you're 1099, it doesn't come with the life insurance plan. I'll be honest, it doesn't come with it. So how are you covering yourself? And most people who transition from the 9-to-5 world into entrepreneurship, they naturally have that. Their mindset is, okay, I'm good. But you're not realizing when you're an entrepreneur, everything is on you. So you might have had coverage with your job, but you say, you know what? F the job. I'm my own boss. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm doing this, and not realizing that one thing about that job, they had a lot of benefits that you were. I wouldn't say take it for granted, but you were casual with it. Why? You were cool with it because it came with the job. Those are the benefits. Once again, if you're an entrepreneur, make sure you get a policy because you don't have coverage. And that's just not that's also health, dental, all of these things. You don't have the coverage, so you got to make sure you know.
No, to your point, it's crazy because you made me think about that. As an entrepreneur, you almost have to get coverage, especially if you're about to get ready to leave your job to do your own business, also while you're at your job, it's a smart time to get coverage while you can afford it and know what it costs. Because to your point, when you leave your job, not only are you about to not have coverage, but you need job for your coverage for yourself, but you also need coverage for your business. A lot of people don't realize that, hey, it's not about whatever. If you're running a business, whether it's by yourself or with somebody, if something were to happen to you and you don't have what's called key insurance, now you're not covered. You can't reproduce the money that you're losing. Meaning that if you have what's called key insurance, similar to like the job insurance, they're going to cover you potentially while you're at the job. If something were to happen and you can't produce and you're making $200,000 a year, that's where that insurance comes in handy. If you don't have a 9 to 5, you have that extra insurance. It's like, damn, something happened in life, and and I'm an entrepreneur, and now you have that coverage to cover you. And that's crazy, because when you think about it, that really made me think about it, where it's like, listen, you have your coverage with your job, but at the end of the day, what happens when you don't have that job? What happens when you're going into entrepreneurship? These are things like we normally don't even think about or talk about it. So that was a good point, Kate. That was a real good point.
Yeah, and once again, it's it's always about having more. Like we live in a world where it's full of abundance. Like, why not have more than just what you have at your job? Shout out to legacy builders, right? Even if you have to get at least a term policy, as it's more affordable, no one should not have a policy. 100%. Absolutely. There's almost no excuse. At this point, when I see someone who doesn't have a policy, to some degree, I'm like, this person is very irresponsible. You're responsible. And yes, I mean it. And we like, and it's not just because we sell it. No. And that's the truth. It's not because we sell it. What it is that how much do you value your life, and how much do you value the lives of the ones that you love? And that's what's important. And that's really what it's all about. Because at the end of the day, it's about peace of mind and income replacement, just in case something happens.
No, to your point though, okay, it's one of those things for real when it comes to life insurance, is that imagine you're a regular person, you work your job, you're 35 years old, you have a 5-year-old kid, and something legit happens to you, and all you have is a policy that you got at your job that you don't understand, and it turns out it's something happens to you outside of the job. You got hurt or injured outside of the job, and that policy doesn't cover it. So now you don't have coverage. That's a crazy world to live in. And even in a scenario where you do have coverage, you only have 30, 40 grand. And the reason why I bring that up is that if something happens to you in the job and you only have 30, 40 grand, it's most likely they're not going to cover nothing crazy. When there's a policy outside of the job that has living benefits. So at the end of the day, if something does happen to you at the job or wherever it happens, and you can't perform 2 out of the 6 of your functions, you can have potentially 25 to 75% of your money up front. So if you got a basic $100,000 policy, you have access anywhere from $25,000 to $75,000 to take care of business or what you need to take care in your life. Whereas with your job policy, you probably don't have any of that. You probably don't have any access to living benefits. So that's another key difference between job insurance and having a policy outside of your job.
And because living benefits, it only came about maybe 6-7 years ago, if that long. So if you've been working for 10 years plus at your job, you ain't got living benefits. That plain and simple. It don't exist at that job. And then also, what happens if your job goes out of business? See, people forget that there is a thing where, because everybody, thinks that their job is so secure. No, your employer can go out of business, and all the benefits that came along with that, something has to happen with those benefits, and a lot of times it's over, with the exception of the 401k. That's a different conversation. However, with your policy, that's as good as done, because it was your employer who was paying for that, right? Sometimes you get the coverage for free. Sometimes you may have to pay a couple of dollars for the policy. What the life insurance companies do for your employer, though, they give them a tax break. Why? Because pretty much they're covering you know, your employer is covering so many employees that your employer actually gets a tax break. So I don't want you to think that your employer loves you that much for why you're getting life insurance with the job. Your employer is doing it because he or she is getting a tax break. They qualify for a tax advantage plan, and they qualify for a tax deferral. That's what they qualify for because of, you know, how much business that your employer is bringing to that specific life insurance company. You know,
I love that. I love that example, okay? Because the example, the example you brought up, at the end of the day, it's kind of like when everybody throw in a pot, the pizza example you had before, everybody leaving with a slice. It's the same way. Nobody's gonna be like, yeah, let me leave a couple extra 5-6 slices. They're gonna be like, nah, I put in my $15 in here. I'm gonna get my money's worth. It's the same concept. So that's why you're not gonna get as much bang for your buck if you don't get other policies out of it. And let's just talk real math and real numbers. At the end of the day, if you got a policy that costs you 50 cents and you get $40,000, and you can get a separate policy out, a term policy at minimum with living benefits for $30 a month and $500,000 of coverage, you telling me you wouldn't pay $30 a month for $500,000 of coverage? If something happened to you, your family get $500K? Better yet, if something happens to you where you need the living benefits where you can't perform a certain action, all that type of stuff, you have access to $200,000-$300,000 and it only costs you $25, and you telling me you don't want to get that? Come on, man. Come on. Like what are we talking about? What are we talking about here?
what are we doing here? Now, what it is too is that the other riders that come along with the term policy, that's not going to come along with your the policy at the job. Like there's something called like the waiver premium, right? So let's say, you know, God forbid you got disabled permanently, though. You have to be permanently disabled. If that happens, then you actually get your payments waived, meaning you don't got to make those payments for pretty much the duration of the term, the length of the term. So let's say, for example, you're young, you're 42 years old, you just got the policy, you turn 44, 45 years old, you permanently got disabled, all the way until 72 years of age, you will be able to get those premiums waived. Now, that means you pretty much got a free policy at that point. Your policy is pretty much paid for at that point. And then with the accelerated death benefit rider, that also comes with the term policy. What is that? So let's say if you have 150,000 worth of coverage, you pass away in an accident, you just got your beneficiary just got another 25,000 on top of that 150. So now they walking away with 175 because that $25,000 accelerated death benefit rider is attached to your term policy. Once again, I'm pretty confident that your term at the job is not coming with these riders that's attached to the policy. And these things are super, super important because when these things actually happen, when it hits home, it hits home for real. So that's why I just want to highlight those different types of riders that come along with the term policy that probably is not going to come with the policies at your job.
Yeah, and I love it. And let's just talk on real quick. So I know we're coming up on time. Just a couple key points that's important to know where you stand. Depending on your age and when you're getting ready to leave your job is super important in this process. Meaning that if you're 60 years old, you need to be getting a policy while you're still working. Because one, it's going to show that you have active coverage, even though it's a group policy, and you're still potentially insurable. Or two, if you're 65, 67, and you're not insurable, we got to go into the final expense world, where at least you're able to get a policy to at least afford to bury you, which is huge. So no matter what stage you're at in life, you need to get a policy outside of your job. But depending on where you're at, we have those conversations with you. So even if you're a person that I got a policy in my job, no problem. Let us at least review the policy with you, review the policy details, so we could be like, hey, this comes with this if you leave this job. Hey, this, you can't take this with you. The 30 portability period, your job doesn't offer it with this policy. So at least if I do leave this job, hey, I can't take this coverage. I can't convert it over after 30 days after I retire. No. So now you at least know you have to get a policy before you leave the job or while you're at the job versus leaving a job. You don't have nothing. or you're able to get coverage and it's $1 million. That's a situation you don't want to be in, because at the end of the day, when it comes to life, you only need life insurance when you need life insurance. You only need car insurance when you get in an accident. You don't need it any other time. You only need a new cell phone when your screen don't work. That's when you put in the insurance claim. You only need it when you need it.
We gotta coin that phrase right there. You only need it when you need it. Get those T-shirts. Where that's real right there. You only need it when you need it. And even to just kind of piggyback off that, we're having this conversation because at some point, if it doesn't happen to you, it's going to happen to somebody in your family, right? And then I've literally been in a situation where someone was like severely ill, and then they wanted to, like, they were in hospice, and then they were asking, their family was asking questions about if they can get life insurance. They were literally on their deathbed asking if they can get life insurance. And the reason why this is important is because the reason why we're having this conversation now is so that, because we can't help you later. The time is now. We can't help you later on.
To your point, Kay, like it's a real thing, and I like that you brought that up, because at the end of the day, I just give a real life stories. I had one of my boys, I grew up with, and he was doing his thing. He's pretty young when he passed away, in his early 30s or whatever the case is, and he was finally getting his life together, everything going good. Finally got a decent job. And for a couple of years, he's like, yo, I'm going to get the policy, bro. I'm going to get a life insurance policy. I'm going to get a life insurance policy. And he kept saying it down to maybe, I think it was like 7-8 months before a tragic thing happened in his life. You know what I mean? He hit me up from the hospital bed. You know what I mean? He had a terminal illness. He hit me up from the hospital bed. And he was like, hey, bro, I can still get that policy? And I had to tell him no. You know what I mean? You can't, because you got a terminal illness. Because part of life insurance is a part of the risk. They're not going to knowingly give you, X amount of dollars, knowing that you're going to, unfortunately, pass away. And it was an uncomfortable conversation. And it was real, because it was really one of those things where he even said, "Is there any way you could do anything on behind the scenes?" I'm like, nah, I can't. You know what I mean? Because they know that you're sick. It's a record of it. And unfortunately, he passed away. And his family, the policy that he had on his job was actually, I think it was like $9,000 or something like that. And he had just 2 new babies. He had like a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, and was just recently married. And all was left was just enough money to bury him. And that's a real life story. I felt horrible, because me as an agent, I felt bad, because I was like, man, I wish I could have told him more and reminded him once a month. But there's only but so much you could do. We try our best to have these messages, but truth is, there's only but so much we could do, so much we could preach. And when it's too late, it's too late. And the crazy part about it, prior to that, he didn't have any illnesses before that terminal illness came up. And I remember doing a basic quote, and it was like, I think at the time, maybe it was like $300K, and it was like $40 a month. And look at the difference. Just enough to bury him, not able to leave his family nothing, or able to bury him and leave his family $280,000 to pay off the house that he just got a mortgage on. And I'm not even going into what happened to the family, but we know what happened. They don't got that house no more. It's not real until it's real. It doesn't hit home till it hits home at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a crazy story, man. Checking out the time. We out of time. But any last minute words, comments, jokes, concerns before we do get out of here? I know we way over our time now. Well, yes, I do. We have an event coming up on the 27th, right? Called Vision and Vibes. Make sure you go get your tickets. Go to www.legacybuildersus.com and check out the website. Go book your tickets. $30. You're gonna get your keynote speakers. You're gonna get food, drinks, the whole 9 yards. Make sure you go ahead and book those tickets. And if nothing else, we'll see you guys next week. Same time, same place. Remember, here at Legacy Builders, we build together to grow forever. Appreciate you guys tuning in. You guys have a good night. Peace.